At my graduation dinner, everyone was laughing until Grandma smiled at me and said, "I'm glad the $3,000 I send you each month is helping." And I want to tell you about the 11 seconds during which my mother realized I had figured out that she had been intercepting $144,000 of my grandmother's money over 4 years. My grandmother is named Petra. Petra is 73. Petra had taught high school chemistry for 37 years. Petra had been the only adult in my life who had told me I should go to college when my parents had told me I should not. The graduation dinner was at a restaurant called Castellanos. The dinner had 11 of us. My parents Sebastian and Marisol, my older brother Caleb and his wife Whitney, my grandmother Petra, my grandfather, my 2 aunts and 1 uncle, me. The thing my parents had been not knowing was that I had been working 3 jobs through college. I had been working at the university library for 15 hours a week. I had been working at a coffee shop for 20 hours a week. I had been doing freelance graphic design for about 10 hours a week. I had been earning approximately $36,000 a year. I had been paying my own rent. I had been paying my portion of tuition. I had been taking out approximately $8,000 a year in student loans. I had been graduating with $32,000 in debt. My grandmother had raised her glass after the appetizers. My grandmother had said, "Sweetheart, I am so proud of you. I have been so glad I could help. The $3,000 I send you each month must have been a real comfort." The table had been laughing at something my uncle had been saying. The laughter died on 3 syllables. My mother's face changed in a way I had never seen on her before. My mother's face had been the face of a woman who had been caught at the moment she had been the most relaxed. I put down my fork. I did the math in my head. $3,000 a month for 48 months equaled $144,000. I had been graduating with student loan debt. I looked at my grandmother. I said, "Grandma, I never got any money." The table went silent in a different way than it had gone silent before. My grandmother said, "Honey, what?" I said, "Grandma, I have been working 3 jobs. I have been paying for everything myself. I have been taking out loans. I have never received any money from you. Where did the money go?" My grandmother turned to my mother. My grandmother said, "Marisol, the money has been going to your account each month. You have been telling me you have been forwarding it. Are you telling me she has not been receiving it?" My mother said, "Let me explain." My grandmother said, "No, please answer." My mother said, "The money has been used for family expenses." I asked my mother to be specific. My mother listed her car payment. My mother listed Caleb's wedding. My mother listed Caleb's first house down payment. My mother listed Caleb's wife's medical bills. My mother listed a vacation. My mother listed approximately 90% of the total. Caleb went white. Caleb said, "Mom, what are you talking about? You told us the wedding money was from your savings. You told us the house down payment was from Dad's bonus. Whitney's medical bills you told us you had been not paying because she had insurance." My grandmother put down her napkin. My grandmother said, "Marisol, I want my granddaughter's money returned, with interest at the rate I would have been earning in a money market account. I am going to be calling Patrice Lemoine in the morning." Patrice Lemoine was my grandmother's attorney. My grandmother said, "You have 90 days. If the money is not returned in 90 days, I am filing a civil suit for conversion. You are also out of my will, permanently." My father said, "Please, can we discuss this privately?" My grandmother said, "No, this happened publicly, and it will be addressed publicly. Any family member who has known about this and not told my granddaughter is also out of my will." My uncle Hendrik raised his hand. My uncle said, "Marisol told me 3 years ago. I told her she should tell you. She said she would." The dinner ended in cold silence. Nobody said goodbye the way you normally say goodbye at a family dinner. Petra found me near the door. Petra took my arm and walked me to the parking lot. The air outside was warm, and the sky was doing that thing where it is not quite dark yet, but everything looks blue. Petra stopped next to her car and turned to me and said, "I am so sorry. I trusted your mother and I should have verified." I started crying and I could not stop. I was crying because I had just found out that someone had been trying to help me for 4 years and I never knew. For 4 years I had been setting my alarm for 5 in the morning to make it to my library shift before class. For 4 years I had been eating ramen at midnight because I could not afford real food. Petra put her hands on my shoulders and said, "You worked 3 jobs. You took out loans, and the whole time I thought you were comfortable." I wiped my face with the back of my hand and said, "I thought you didn't care enough to help." Petra's chin started shaking and her eyes filled up. This was the first time in my entire life I had seen my grandmother cry. She pulled me into a hug so tight I could feel her heartbeat through her jacket. I got into my parents' car about 10 minutes later. Sebastian did not say a word. He started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. Marisol started talking before we hit the first red light. "Your grandmother is overreacting. The money went to this family. It went to your brother's wedding. It went to keeping us afloat." I said, "It went to my name, Mom. It was addressed to me." Marisol said, "You had financial aid. You had your little jobs. Caleb had real needs. 3 jobs, 45 hours a week on top of a full course load. Little jobs." I said, "You decided my needs weren't real." Marisol said, "I decided what was best for this family." I looked at the back of my father's head. Sebastian's hands were tight on the steering wheel. His knuckles were pale, and he said absolutely nothing, not one word. I watched him grip that wheel, and I understood something about my father that I had probably always known, but had never put into words. Sebastian was a man who let things happen around him, and then acted like he had not been in the room. The next morning, I woke up to 14 missed calls. I called Caleb first. He picked up on the first ring. His voice sounded rough. "I feel sick." She told me the wedding money was from her savings account. She told me the down payment was Dad's bonus from work. She looked me in the eye and lied to me for 4 years. I said, "She looked me in the eye too, Caleb." Every time I told her I was exhausted from working 3 jobs, she looked me in the eye. Caleb went quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I want to pay you back for Whitney's medical bills. That's on me now." About 2 hours after I hung up with Caleb, my phone rang again. It was Marisol, but her voice was different this time. The sharp tone from the car was gone. This voice was calm, almost sweet. "Sweetheart, I know you're upset, but I want you to know something. I started putting money aside to pay it back. I have $11,000 in a savings account. I was going to give it to you after graduation." I went cold. $11,000 out of $144,000. But the number was not the part that hit me the hardest. The part that hit me the hardest was that Marisol had a separate savings account, a separate account that she had been putting money into specifically because she knew she owed me. She had not been confused. She had been stealing from her daughter, and she had known it was stealing. I hung up the phone. 3 days later, I was sitting in Patrice's office with Petra beside me. Patrice had a folder open on her desk that was about 2 inches thick. Your grandmother has documentation of every transfer, Patrice said. 48 monthly payments of $3,000 to an account in your mother's name. Your mother signed a letter in year 1 acknowledging the funds were designated for your education. I blinked. I said, what letter? Patrice slid a single piece of paper across the table toward me. At the bottom was my mother's signature. Above it was a sentence that said, I acknowledge these funds are to be used exclusively for my daughter's college education and living expenses. I read that sentence 3 times. Patrice said, this gives us grounds for conversion, breach of fiduciary duty, and potentially fraud. If your mother cannot repay within the 90-day window, we file. I looked at my grandmother. I asked, Grandma, are you sure you want to go through with this? This is your daughter. Petra did not look away from me. She said, my daughter stole from my granddaughter. If I do nothing, I am telling you that you matter less than keeping the peace. You have always mattered more than the peace. I had to look down at the table after she said that because I could feel my eyes starting to burn again. Nobody had ever told me that I mattered more than keeping things smooth and quiet and comfortable for everyone else. I had spent my whole life being the one who did not complain. I drove back to the apartment I shared with my best friend Euphemia. Euphemia had been my anchor through all 4 years of college. I walked through the front door and Euphemia took one look at my face and said, have you eaten today? I told her everything. When I was done, she said, and your dad knew? I said, I don't know what my dad knew. Euphemia looked at me straight and said, you need to find out, because if he knew, that changes everything. I called Sebastian that night. He agreed to meet me at a diner the next morning. He walked in about 10 minutes later, and I could tell from across the room that he had not slept. I said, Dad, did you know about the money? Sebastian said, not the specifics. I knew your mother was receiving money from Petra. I thought it was going into a family account. I did not ask questions. I said, you didn't ask questions about $3,000 a month. Sebastian said, your mother handled the finances. She always handled the finances. I trusted her. I said, you trusted her with my future. Sebastian put his head in his hands. He stayed like that for a while. He said, I should have asked. I know that now. I looked at him and I wanted to be angry, but sitting there watching him, I realized something. My father was not a villain. My father was a man who had chosen comfort over curiosity for his entire marriage. He had let Marisol handle everything because it was easier than asking hard questions. And that lazy, quiet choice to not look too close had cost his daughter everything. I did not forgive him that morning at the diner, but I understood him. That evening my phone rang and it was my Aunt Callista. Your mother called me. She is asking the family to talk to you. She wants everyone to convince you and Petra to drop this. I said, what did you tell her? Callista said, I told her I'm not getting involved. I said, that is getting involved, Aunt Callista. Not picking a side when someone stole from your niece is picking a side. Over the next 2 weeks, Marisol did what Marisol does best. She worked the phones. Each one of them called me. Each one of them had the same script. This is going to destroy the family. Petra is being too harsh. You should think about forgiveness. Not a single one of them asked me how I was doing. Not one of them said, are you okay? Somewhere around the 4th or 5th call, I stopped being sad and I started seeing it clearly. Marisol was not sorry. Marisol was running a campaign. She was managing a crisis the way a person manages a crisis when they know they are guilty. Then Caleb called. It was a Thursday night. He sounded tired. Mom came to my house. She sat on my couch and cried for 2 hours. She told me that grandma is cutting her out of the will and that you are helping grandma do it. I closed my laptop. I said, Caleb, mom stole $144,000 from me, from my education. I graduated with $32,000 in debt while she paid for your wedding. Caleb said, I know, but she's my mom and she was sitting on my couch crying. I said, she was sitting on the couch she bought with my money, Caleb. The line went quiet. Then he said, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm not going to be her messenger. But Marisol was not done. Marisol escalated. About 3 days after Caleb's call, I opened my email and there was a message from Marisol. It was the longest email my mother had ever sent me in my life. It did not start with, I'm sorry. It started with a description of me. You have always been independent. You have always been capable. Caleb needed help in ways you never did. I made the decisions I made because I was trying to keep this family together. If you go through with this lawsuit, you will lose your mother. I read the email a 3rd time and something in my chest got very still and very cold because on the 3rd read, I saw what was missing. There was no apology, not even a bad one. There was no sentence that said, I was wrong. There was only the argument that I had not needed the money because I was strong enough to survive without it. She was punishing me for being tough. She was using my own survival against me like it was proof that I had not been hurt. I forwarded the entire email to Patrice. Patrice called me back within the hour. This email is useful. She admits to redirecting the funds and she admits it was a deliberate choice. She has put her reasoning in writing. Then I heard a second voice on the line. Petra. Marisol has had 6 weeks of her 90 days. She has not paid $1. I am done waiting for her to do the right thing. I said, Grandma, are you sure? Petra said, sweetheart, I spent 37 years teaching teenagers that actions have consequences. I am not going to teach my own daughter the opposite. On day 60, Patrice sent Marisol a formal demand letter by certified mail. Sebastian called me that same evening. Your mother is scared. She doesn't have the money. I said, she had 4 years to not spend it, Dad. Sebastian was quiet for a beat and then he said, she wants to meet. All of us. She says she wants to make it right. Petra's response was immediate. If she wants to meet, we meet at Patrice's office, not at her kitchen table where she controls the room. The meeting happened on day 75. Everyone was there. Marisol, Sebastian, Caleb, Petra, Patrice, me. Marisol was across from me. She cleared her throat and said, I want to take responsibility. I made choices that I thought were best for the family at the time. I see now that those choices hurt my daughter. I am sorry. The apology sounded like a speech. It did not sound like it came from a person who felt something. It sounded like it came from a person who had been told that saying these words was her best option. I said, Mom, what specifically are you sorry for? Marisol blinked. She said, for not being transparent about the money. I said, you're sorry for not being transparent. You're not sorry for taking it. Marisol's jaw tightened. She said, I used the money for family needs. I said, it wasn't family money. It was my money. Grandma sent it for me. You signed a letter saying you would give it to me. You lied to Grandma every month for 4 years. You lied to me every time I told you I was tired from working 3 jobs and you said nothing. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught. The room was so quiet I could hear the air coming through the vent in the ceiling. Caleb spoke next. Mom, she's right. You told me the wedding money was your savings. You told me the down payment was Dad's bonus. You lied to me too. Whitney was sitting beside Caleb. She said quietly, my medical bills. You told us insurance covered them. I thanked my insurance company. I wrote them a letter. Nobody said anything after that. Petra spoke last. Marisol, I am going to make this simple. You have 15 days left. Patrice has prepared a repayment agreement. You will repay the full $144,000 plus 6% interest over the next 10 years. The payments will go directly to my granddaughter through a trust account that Patrice will administer. You will not handle the money. You will sign this agreement today, or I file on day 91. Marisol looked around the room. She looked at Sebastian. Sebastian was looking at the table. She looked at Caleb. Caleb was looking at the wall. Nobody rescued her. Marisol turned back to Petra and said, and if I sign, am I back in your will? Petra said, no. Marisol's face crumbled. She said, so I pay everything back and I still lose. Petra looked at her daughter and said, you lost the moment you stole from your daughter and felt justified doing it. Patrice slid the agreement across the desk. Marisol picked up the pen and signed. I waited for something to hit me. Relief, satisfaction, something. But what I felt was the weight of what I had just seen. My mother, in a room full of her family, had looked at every single person before she looked at the paper. She had scanned every face for an ally. And when nobody did, her first question was not about me. Her first question was about the will. Even at the very end, sitting in that chair with her daughter across from her and a repayment agreement in front of her, it was never about me. It had never been about me. 8 months after the signing, Caleb called me on a Tuesday and said, Dad moved out. He said he couldn't look at her the same way after Patrice's office. Caleb had paid back Whitney's medical bills directly to the trust, and we talked every week now, and we had never been closer. Petra paid for my graduate school in full, in cash, directly to the university. No middleman, no family account, and I started my program with zero debt for the first time in my life. On my first day of classes, Petra sent me a photo of herself at her kitchen table drinking coffee with a one-line message that said, go learn something. I sat in my first lecture, and I thought about the 11 seconds at the restaurant when my mother's face changed, and I thought about how long she had to decide to do the right thing, and how many times she chose not to. I thought about 3 jobs, and exhaustion, and loan paperwork signed at midnight. I thought about my grandmother, 73 years old, who loved me enough to burn the family down rather than let the lie stand. I opened my notebook and I started writing.